happy to have a full house here this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we have invited you here to address you on some claims about so-called unprecedented achievements that the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Jean Adukwe Mensah, claims to have chopped in the last 2020 general elections, and also some proposals that they have already put out that IPAC has been engaged on. So without wasting much time, we've already told you why we are here. I will invite the Director for Elections, Honorable HAFIZ Ankra, to do two things. Number one, respond to the claims made by the EC chairperson, Jean Mensah, and also number two, to explain to you our reason for boycotting the IPAC engagements that the EC, has been that have been going on the past 2 days. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me invite to the podium now our Director for Elections, Honorable HAFIZ Ankra, to address us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sami Jemfi, National Chairman, members of FEC, and all dignitaries present, all other protocols observed. Thank you for your presence here this afternoon. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the media. You are welcome to the headquarters of the NDC for this all-important press conference. The NDC has taken notice of several false claims made by the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Jean Adukwe Mensah, in a speech delivered at the just-ended 2-day workshop between the EC and the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC, at Alisa Hotel in Accra. The purpose of this press conference is to formally respond to and expose the many unfounded claims peddled by the EC chairperson in a speech at the program, and to explain to you the reasons for our boycott of these IPAC engagements. Friends from the media, contrary to the claims by the EC chairperson that the 2020 general elections was the best ever in the history of this country and called for the nation to celebrate some so-called unprecedented successes struck by the EC in the conduct of the elections, the facts show that last year's elections was one of the most poorly conducted, flawed, and manipulated elections in the history of this country. A situation that has undermined the strides we have made since the inception of this fourth Republican democratic dispensation. And we say this for the following reasons. One, the dubious handling of the printing and distribution of ballot papers and other electoral materials that led to ballot stuffing by the MPP in their strongholds and other regions. You will recall that we invited you here and showed you videos of over 1 million ballot papers that we found after the distribution of ballot papers. And those ballot papers were meant for Ashanti region. Again, during the elections, we found ballot papers that had been thumbprinted with the authenticated with the EC's own validation stamp in several parts of the Ashanti region. And in fact, in some constituencies, because the alarm was raised, those ballot papers were dumped. And we have cause to believe, based on our final assessment, that some of these ballot papers found their way into the ballot boxes in the strongholds of the MPP. Two, the unprecedented number of rejected ballots recorded in the elections, owing largely to the incompetence and recklessness of the EC in using unapproved stamp pads instead of the approved voting ink pad that we have used in previous elections. Again, you will recall that in this particular election, the EC, for some strange reason, decided to use some very strange stamp pads. And what happens is that when people go and vote and they fold the ballot, because there's so much liquid in the ink pad, it then sticks onto the other side of the ballot. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many rejected ballots. 3, the use of illegal statement of polls pink sheets, that is from HB, that omitted BVD entries in about 7,581 polling stations, thereby undermining the ballot accounting process and the integrity of the entire results. This totally belies the false claim by the EC and Mensa that only 11,000 people voted by manual verification in the 2020 general elections. And this is very serious because the Form 8B is a legal form. The EC presented that to Parliament, how the form should be, what should be on the form, and Parliament approved it. Subsequently, just a few days before the election, we noticed that the form that they had printed and were going to distribute across the country was different from the form that had been approved by Parliament. And the significant omission was that where you could do proper ballot accounting, where you could determine whether people voted manually or biometrically, was not in there. And we insisted, I recall we even called a press conference and informed you. And when we insisted, and there was directive at IPAC that they should go and reprint a day or 2 days before the election, they came and said they were putting stamps on those forms. And in many of those cases, the forms were not filled. And when that happens, you cannot properly account for the people who voted either biometrically or manually. 4, widespread cases of patent arithmetic errors on the faces of pink sheets and constituency results summary sheets, on the faces of pink sheets and constituency results summary sheets by incompetent EC staff in the filling of electoral forms and aggregation of valid votes. 5, manipulation of figures by the EC leading to a disparity between constituency collated results aggregates and regional collated results aggregates. So if you put together all the collated results from the constituencies based on the pink sheets, minus the Chiman South, what you get is 13,118,640. Now, if you put together all the regional collating sheets, you put all together, what you get is 13,119,460. So clearly, there was a problem somewhere, and it was due to deliberate manipulation, in our view. Padding of votes at the constituency collation centers in favor of candidate Akufo-Addo. What it means is that at the end of the polls at some polling stations, if candidate Akufo-Addo got maybe 540 votes, they will add maybe 20 to it. And you put all together, this is not allowed. It is illegal. 7, no proper collation at the National Collation Center by the returning officer for the presidential elections, Mrs. Jane Adukwe Mensah. And you all recall all the incidents that happened at the collation center where our agents there said they didn't even have the opportunity to see and verify the results that were coming from some of the regions before she subsequently went and announced the results. 8, unprecedented cases of state-sponsored violence and murder at constituency collation centers, occasioned by the reckless and unlawful conduct of some EC officials and the despotic Akufo-Addo government, and in contravention of our time-tested election security arrangements. Now, this is an election where we have counted 8 people dead. If you add Silas, who was murdered during the registration process, that is 9. It has never, ever, ever happened in this country before. After an election, you have 8 souls, 8 innocent Ghanaians, including 14-year-olds, killed And you say this was the best election ever? Are we serious? Are we for real? 8 people died, perished. And you said this was the best election? And some of these violence acts were occasioned by the activities of the EC themselves. Look at Techiman South. It was as a result of the conduct of the returning officer. That is what occasioned the violence. So the EC cannot absolve itself of blame. And indeed, the security arrangement has always been that during an election period, the political officers, that is the district chief executives, municipal chief executives, metropolitan chief executives, they recuse themselves, and then the head of security in the region takes over the security arrangements, with the electoral commission officer becoming the secretary to the security committee. And they put in place the modality for security. So the EC is part of that security architecture. So they cannot absolve themselves. And they presented a budget to Parliament, and in that budget, security arrangements were part of it. So if you've presented a budget for security arrangement, how then do you turn around and say you were not responsible for the security arrangement? That is totally untenable and unacceptable. 9. Also, contrary to the claim that the international community has hailed the conduct of the 2020 general elections, as Jane Mensah will have us believe, the European Union is on record to have decried the non-transparency of the collation process for the elections. So flawed was the conduct of the 2020 general elections that for the first time in the history of this country, a whole district made up of Santro Kofi, Akpafu, Lipe, and Lolobi Sal communities were deliberately disenfranchised by the EC for the sole purpose of assisting the NPP candidate John Peter Amewu win the Hawkway seat. Is this what Jane Mensah and her bias commission is inviting us to celebrate? That a whole community will go for an election, they vote for parliamentary, presidential elections. In fact, they were informed that they were going to vote. And just a few days before, a night before, by administrative fiat, against the constitution, against common sense, against the rule of law, against the right of representation of people, you just decide that they cannot vote. And you say we should celebrate this, and this was the best election? Again, 11 or 10. The claim by the EC that an amount of $90 million was saved in the conduct of the 2020 general elections is completely contrived. The facts show that the state incurred avoidable financial loss as a result of the procurement of a facial recognition technology by the EC that turned out to be a fiasco. You recall, before the registration exercise, which we protested against, and which many right-thinking Ghanaians, CSOs, all over the place said it wasn't necessary, one of their major defenses was that they were procuring a software that had the capacity for facial recognition. So if you go and your fingerprint could not be picked by the BVD, there will be facial recognition. How many of you went to vote and there was any facial recognition? 0. And yet, the cost of the equipment was high because of that so-called facial recognition. And that facial recognition became almost redundant during the elections. So it is therefore ridiculous and laughable, to say the least, that the election management body that has failed to pay its temporary staff their allowances 5 months after an election will make the claim that they saved the nation money. Are you aware that the temporary staff who work for the EC all across the country, they've not been paid? Are you aware, media? And so you haven't paid the people who worked for you. And then you turn around 5 months after, you say you have saved the country money. What kind of accounting is this? Does it make sense? We wish to entreat the public to treat this baseless claim with the contempt it deserves and wait for a credible audit into the EC's expenditure for the 2020 general elections. I think Parliament should be preparing to invite them to come and explain. The people who worked, put their lives on the line that day, they are Ghanaians, they deserve to be paid. It is only after such a process by an independent entity that we can validate their claims. Now we come to the next reason for our press conference, that proposed reforms by the Electoral Commission. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we have taken note of some proposals for reforms that the Electoral Commission has put forward for the consideration of IPAC. However, in our view, the first and most important reform required is for the EC to reform itself. Particularly, Jen Mensah and Bosman Asari, they must be the first to reform and change their attitude of arrogance and bias. Ladies and gentlemen, we have worked with various commissioners, we've worked with Dr. Farijan. The posturing and attitude of Jen Mensah and Bosman Asari is that of unbridled arrogance, pomposity, bias, and disrespect, particularly for the NDC and its national officers. And you can bear testimony of the numerous instances. You go for a meeting with this woman, things that were not on the agenda. After the meeting, she comes out, releases a statement, and says, we all agreed on something we didn't even discuss, which was not on the agenda. You go for a meeting, General Secretary chuckles, he says, you can't laugh in my meeting. Complete disrespect. Proposals upon proposals, inputs upon inputs. There is not even one, single one, since this EC came to power, that the NDC has put forward that they have listened to. And in many instances, we have been vindicated. I will come to that. So they must reform themselves first. So I'll now proceed to do a critical and objective analysis of the 4 reform proposals put forward by the EC. 1. Closure of polls at 3 p.m. in 2024. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the NDC finds the proposal by the Jane Mensah-led EC to change the closing time of polls from 5 p.m. to 3 p.m. in 2024 baffling and mind-boggling. Since the 1992 elections, polls have always closed at 5 p.m. This has worked perfectly without any challenges whatsoever. It therefore beggars belief that the EC would want to change this time-tested arrangement and go for a poorly thought-through alternative, which is bound to disenfranchise eligible voters and create needless problems for our electoral system. This is particularly so given the undue delay we usually record in the delivery of electoral materials to some polling stations and other technical challenges that usually characterize voting in this country. Ghanaians will recall, so before I go into that, even with the 5 o'clock, there are instances in some parts of the country that because materials did not arrive early, voting continued beyond the 5 o'clock. Machines got spoiled, etc. So many, and it's been going on consistently. And then now you want to close at 3 o'clock. Ghana is not Accra and Kumasi and Takrady. In some of the rural areas, the poor farmers, they have to go to the farm, get some food for the day before they come and vote. So you create a situation where you are going to create unnecessary panic, tension, and confusion. Is this necessary at this time? Ghanaians will recall how a similar hasty decision by the EC to declare results within 24 hours after closure of polls in the 2020 elections failed miserably and led to the rushed declaration of a patently flawed results that yielded a percentage aggregate of more than 100% by the returning officer, Madame Jane Adukwe Mensah. One would have thought that Jane Mensah would have learned the right lessons by now, but that appears not to be the case. You were all here when they announced that they were going to declare results in 24 hours. You are all here. We told you and we told them, this is not going to work. It doesn't make sense. As usual. So when we say she is arrogant, disrespectful, that is another classical example. We told you, we told her, it is not going to work. What happened? Eventually, she had to eat back her own words and then declare the results on the 9th. And even on the 9th, look at the results. You declare results which, when you put all together, is over 100%. Common arithmetic. Because of the rush, the indecent haste. And then you do a correction. That correction too is wrong. You do a third correction. That one too, we go to court. Then you produce a figure different from the first two. So as we speak today, we don't know the actual results of the elections. And you say this is the best results, and now you are coming to introduce something that can lead to chaos in this country. Friends from the media, our position on this proposal is simple. The current arrangements of closing polls at 5 p.m. has worked perfectly in 7 general elections in this country and does not require any fixing. And to quote her, she said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if the 5 p.m. hasn't caused us any problems over the past 7 elections, why do you want to change it? For what purpose? Is it an attempt to create a situation where if materials delay in the strongholds of some parties, 3 o'clock, they say they've closed. So you disenfranchise some people? They are the ones who open room for people to speculate because it's a completely unreasonable proposition. 2, substitution of periodic mass registration with continuous registration. We wish to remind the Electoral Commission that the all-round continuous registration of eligible voters is not new. The law requires the Commission to put in place mechanisms to ensure that at any time that citizens become eligible to vote, they can be registered. However, there are systems of checks and balances that we all agreed at IPAC. So that it was done as the last Friday of every month. So when that time comes, the political parties are there to ensure that the system is not abused. So if you say there should be continuous registration all year, are we going to employ people and put them, the political parties, at the various EC district offices so that they can be monitoring what goes on? Because we know that every system is subject to manipulation and abuse. However, continuous registration cannot be a substitute for periodic nationwide registration because the all-round registration can only be done at the district offices of the Electoral Commission. And again, this Accra Kumasi type of thinking, where you think that Ghana is Accra Kumasi, people have to travel several kilometers to district offices, and not everyone can do this. For some poor farmer in some village, 5 cities, 10 cities from his village to the district center is a problem. How much yam would he, or cassava, or plantain would he harvest, sell, get some to feed, get some to buy kerosene, get some to buy salt and fish, and use some to travel to a district center? The law requires the Commission to put in place mechanisms to ensure that anytime citizens become eligible to vote, they can be registered. Secondly, political parties always assign agents to observe the voters' registration process. It would therefore be ludicrous for the EC to suggest that political parties should employ permanent agents at their district offices to observe the registration of eligible voters all year round. This proposal also comes against a major challenge of transparency in verifying the claims of prospective registrants at the district office level. Even the registration normal that we are all there seeing, they are stealing. then the one you won't be there. What do you think will happen? 3, introducing all year-round voter exhibition exercise through the use of technology. The proposals of the EC to have a year-round exhibition is a laudable idea, but cannot be a substitute for the periodic exhibition exercise of the voters' register that is normally done after voter registration. This is simply because the voter exhibition exercise is not only intended to afford voters the opportunity to verify and confirm their details, but also, and this is important, 1, to ensure ineligible registrants, minors and foreigners are challenged and removed from the register. 2, to help clean the names of dead people from the register. 3, afford voters the opportunity to confirm their captured biometric features. All these things cannot be done through the system the EC is proposing. So if you say people should just get up and go and register, how are you going to check? How are you going to remove dead names from the register? And how can you ensure that people confirm their biometric details, which we spend so much money to buy equipment for? Given the errors that occurred in the run-up to the 2020 elections when the system was deployed, and the fact that not all Ghanaians have mobile phones to assist the system, it cannot be a replacement for periodic voters' registration exhibition. 4, that's their 4th proposition, is to restrict data entry of election results to the constituency collation level and generate national, regional, and national reports. The proposal to have the entry point of data done only at constituency collation centers will introduce another set of opportunities for rigging and manipulation of the election through hacking and other means. The way to build fair, competent EC staff to ensure accurate data entry and collation, and not to throw away the time-tested practices of collation at the national level. Data entry and collation must be done at the constituency level and sent to the National Collation Center for aggregation by the returning officer and with the participation of political party representatives. This will ensure accuracy and transparency in the aggregation of constituency results for free and fair election results declaration. So, we're saying that we would check the results at the constituency level. The EC is proposing that once that is done through a system, electronic means, that's it. We're saying no, we should do it again at the national center to validate whatever has come in from the constituency. Because between the national and the constituency, many things happen. You recall in 2016, the EC themselves said their system had been hacked. And indeed at IPAC, a committee was set up. The NDC had a representative to go into that hacking matter. The committee met once or twice and nothing. Again, the EC, the J. Mensa-led EC, they were no longer interested in finding out what happened to the so-called hacking in 2016. So we cannot leave our destiny in the hands of any electronic system without putting in place checks and measures to ensure that it's not manipulated. Now to our boycott of IPAC. As you may be aware, the National Democratic Congress has decided to boycott IPAC temporarily due to the bastardization of that revered body by the Jane Mensah Bosman-Asare-led Electoral Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, the framers of the 1992 Constitution, in their wisdom, created the Electoral Commission as an independent institution to perform its constitutional functions without the control of any person or group of persons. The independence given to the Electoral Commission under the 1992 Constitution is based on the presumption that the Electoral Commission will at all times perform its duties conscientiously in the ultimate interest of Ghana and Ghanaians. However, this does not mean that the Commission is not accountable to the people and can therefore decide to act whimsically or capriciously in ways that undermine our democratic experiment. Unfortunately, the Jane Mensah-led Electoral Commission has misinterpreted this independence to mean arrogance and non-accountability. And they've said it several times, Osman, we are not bound by IPAC decisions. IPAC can only advise us, we are not bound. Meanwhile, all the reforms that we've had came through IPAC. So it is that posturing, and it is sad that the Supreme Court of the country endorsed this irresponsible conduct of the EC and allow them to get away with the embarrassment they caused this country in the 2020 general elections. Ladies and gentlemen, one unique convention of Ghana's electoral system, which has become international best practice, is the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC. The rationale for IPAC, as it has been over the years, is to create a platform for consensus building on major issues affecting elections with key stakeholders involved in elections. Over the years, IPAC has served Ghana well as a platform where ideas are shared on various issues before the EC takes substantive decisions on critical electoral issues. Indeed, to promote transparency in our electoral process, IPAC has been involved in the drafting of constitutional instruments on elections, as well as procurement processes of the EC and the previous EC chairpersons. IPAC is supposed to serve as a platform where political parties participate in all electoral activities throughout the electoral cycle, such as voter registration, exhibition of the voters' register, printing of ballot papers, observing the voting process at all polling stations through polling agents, as well as collation of results at both the constituency and national levels. Unfortunately, since the June 2018 ouster of the chairperson of the Electoral Commission and her two deputies, and their subsequent replacement with Jane Mensah and Bosman Asari, all these best practices have been thrown to the dogs. The current leadership of the Electoral Commission has turned IPAC from a consultative and consensus-building platform to an information-sharing platform where the EC only comes to impose its decisions on IPAC without room for deliberations and exchange of ideas. It became so bad to the point that the EC even publicly announced that IPAC had agreed to the decision to compile a new register for the 2020 elections when the issue of a new register had not even been discussed at the said meeting. And I'm sure you all recall that issue. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jane Mensah-led EC appears to be in a world of its own. The Commission appears to be tickling itself and laughing. The Electoral Commission has, for the first time in our history, conducted elections that leaves doubts on the minds of Ghanaians and other observers on the credibility of the elections. The Commission declared wrong results, and even after issuing an unsigned press release to subsequently correct same, the figures still do not add up. Instead of taking advantage of the election petition to clear itself of the mess caused, the EC failed to mount the witness box to testify and explain to Ghanaians how it arrived at its results. It is this same belligerent posture of the EC that has led to the situation where, for the first time in the... I think this is a repetition of a page. Yeah. All right? Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So, Ladies and gentlemen, after a painstaking review of the 2020 elections, the following are the preliminary proposals for electoral reforms which the NDC intends to engage various stakeholders such as the media, civil society organizations, religious leaders, traditional leaders, development partners, the diplomatic community, and the general public. These preliminary proposals are as follows. 1. That the participation of IPAC and its advisory role in the electoral process should be given legal backing without encroaching on the constitutional independence of the Electoral Commission. 2. That the EC adopts an equitable voting formula for political parties in IPAC deliberations based on their representation in Parliament. So as we speak now, there are two parties with representation in Parliament, the NDC and MPP. Based on the EC's own results, the NDC at 47 point what? Whatever. So these are major reforms. We had 6.2 million plus Ghanaians voted for the NDC. Now, basic common sense, courtesy, logic. You think that the EC thinks they can do reforms and they won't take into account the NDC's position? Does it make sense? So you see where they are leading us to. And it is because of that posturing that they can do whatever they want. So you have a situation, and let me just say, we have respect for all political parties, but there are rules also that govern who or what a political party is. So you cannot have a situation where a party that has 137 seats in Parliament, we go for meeting, our opponents, the MPP, they also have 137 seats. And then you have parties that have no seats. Not to talk about even whether they are nationally represented. That's not for me to determine. Okay, they didn't even participate in the elections. And you say when we go and vote, I should have one vote, MPP should have one vote, and all those parties singularly should have one vote. So when you bring together all those 20 or so parties, out of them we have one vote. Does it make sense? You didn't participate in the elections. And they have been recruited by the EC to deceive themselves and Ghanaians. That is fraudulent behavior. Countrymen, what is going on in this country is frightening. The EC is the institution that is supposed to ensure that the laws governing political parties are obeyed. So for purposes of achieving whatever agenda, entities that they know would ordinarily not qualify, even to be political parties, they recruit and mobilize them, bring them, then they will all say, we agree, and we sign. Then the NDC, which is the biggest opposition party, we are one. Is this for real? So when we go to IPAC meetings, our presence and input doesn't make any difference. Do you understand? Because it doesn't matter how sane and sanguine your arguments are, let's just mobilize those people. Okay, so let's vote. Then if you are the cause of this world, then they all, yeah. I mean, this is a sham. It's duplicity at this highest. And we shouldn't allow this to pass. Don't let anybody throw wool over your eyes. If you don't go to IPAC, this is it. It's a sham. And if there are no fundamental changes, it will just be a complete waste of everybody's time. So the EC must adopt an equitable voting formula for political parties in IPAC deliberations based on their representation in Parliament. We are not saying other parties who otherwise qualify cannot be part of IPAC. That's not what we're saying. In fact, Madame J. Mensah, when she was with IE and she was doing the political parties program, somebody should ask her, why is it that in that program, she didn't say every party should come to that program? The basis for participation in that program was representation in parliament. No, so there was a logic to it. So how come that now you are at IPAC? You are at EC. Again, let me put on record, we don't have any problem with other political parties. We don't have any problem in their existence, but we're saying that there should be common sense and logic in when it comes to this. You cannot say that a party that has 137 seats in parliament should go and then you bring 20 other parties, most of them don't have any seat, didn't participate in the election, and they all have one vote. That is why, again, at IPAC, when we form the committees, what happens is that the NDP has one representative, the NDC has one representative, and all the other political parties have one representative. Maybe you can argue that they could have a couple more, whatever. But there should be some sanguinity in this thing, not just any bizarre and perverse, arrangement. Thank you. That the Electoral Commission complies with the use of the legally prescribed statement of poll pink sheet from 8A, and I think that your question and follow-up is a reflection of all that we've been saying. On one hand, the EC says your decisions are binding. They are binding on the NDC. The NDC, the biggest opposition party, with 137 members of parliament and a speaker, your decisions are binding on us. In other words, he's telling us, take it or leave it. To hell with you. Is this not precisely what we are saying? It's a confirmation. It's a confirmation of precisely what we have been saying. That the attitude and posturing of the EC has been one of arrogance, disrespect, bias, open and complete bias. And that is why we've given you precedents, several precedents to show that you go to meetings, you raise cogent issues. Once they've taken, don't forget that yesterday they came out, she did a press conference, right? Then today, they came out with a communique. Tell me what was the difference between the press conference and the communique. So it was predetermined. This is what we want to do. And eventually, this is what they will do. And we're saying that on the basis of that posturing, it becomes completely useless for us to participate in that arena. And so, we're saying that our team, what we presented are just preliminary proposals. They are working on comprehensive proposals, and we are going to engage the Ghanaian public, because the EC, you see, there's a very perverse interpretation of independence which the EC must cure itself of. You understand me? We will engage the public that pays them, because it's Ghanaians that pay them. They are not an entity unto themselves. They are there to serve the public. We will engage civil society. We will engage religious leaders. We will engage the media. We will engage the totality of Ghanaians, put our proposals forward, and together we will put pressure on them to ensure that the right thing is done. Otherwise, it's business as usual. It's just going to be business as usual. You will go, you will talk. They will say, all of you, all the yes say, how do they say it in Parliament crowd? Say aye. All who are for say aye. Then aye. All against say no. Even if you shout louder, so the ayes have it. So we are not in for that circus. Okay? So their attitude and posturing must change. And that answers the second question. That if the EC, and the first step is that we are preparing our proposals. And you see, let's get this thing clear. Listen very carefully. Anybody who thinks that the EC can do whatever it wants, they may have gotten away with some things in the past. Going forward, anybody who thinks that the EC can do whatever they want and get away with it in 2024, that person must be living in cuckoo land. No further comments.
So, ladies and gentlemen, just to reiterate the point Honorable Elvis made, like he has already stated, our boycott of IPAC is a temporary one. There were some questions as to, okay, until when will you be going back? The NDC is ever willing to engage in IPAC meetings and engage the EC, provided that the current modus operandi of IPAC is reviewed. Because like Honorable Elvis explained, the current system, when it comes to representation and voting on key issues, does not allow for meaningful deliberations and consensus building. A friend of mine, somebody was telling me this morning that system is like a headmistress-student relationship system, where the headmistress walks in, delivers a speech, your views are sought, you say whatever you want, say, okay, we've heard you, but your views are not binding on us, so that is it. You understand? So it is that headmistress-student relationship we are against. It is that dictatorial posture we are against. Okay? And then secondly, the voting arrangement at IPAC must be in consonance with, must be equitable, first of all. When we say it must be equitable, we are talking about that voting arrangement being in accordance with the strength of political parties in Parliament, as the case is at the IE. And this is an issue that you, our friends in the media, must take up seriously. Chairman was just telling me that in the processes leading to the compilation of the first biometric register under the leadership of Afarijan, a committee was set up, on the procurement of the systems for that process and the compilation of that biometric register. The NDC had one representative on that committee. The MPP also had one, and all the other political parties had one. Now, like Honorable Elvis said, we are amenable to any increments in the quota that is given to the other political parties. But to give all political parties the same voting rights as the MPP and the NDC, just because the MPP is in cahoots with the EC and have succeeded in recruiting some mushroom political parties to do their bidding at IPAC, is not fair and totally undermines the purpose of IPAC. Earlier today, Chairman, can I have your phone? Earlier today, the EC issued a communique after a communique on the back of the two-day workshop. No, Chairman's phone. The two-day workshop, which was just concluded today at Alisa Hotel. I just want to share with you. Yes. I just want to share with you some of the political parties who were present at this IPAC meeting and have actually signed a communique, so that you appreciate, because sometimes even some of our own members don't appreciate the reason for the boycott. So you have, of course, we know the CPP, PNC, these are respectable political parties. I mean, we don't have anything against any political party, but just take a listen at some of the political parties which were there. UDS party, ULP party.
Please, what's the formula of UDS?
I don't know. I actually don't know. They've written UDS. Then there is ULP party. Then there is PUP party. Then there is GMP party. Of course, we know of GUM. We also know of GCPP. We know of PPP. Then there is IPS. I don't know which political party is that. And then LPG is Kofi Akpalus party. I don't know whether they even participated in last year's elections. Yes, of course, we know of the respectable APC and the other political. So you see, you can go for these meetings, raise all the issues we have raised here with you. And when it comes to voting, the issue is, okay, in any case, your decisions are not binding on us, but let's take a vote. And all these political parties who are there to do the bidding, and not all the political parties I mentioned, like CPP, PPP, APC, and there are other political, PNC and all that. But of course, you know the mushroom political parties I'm talking about. Some of whom don't even have offices in this country, are called upon and they are giving one vote. Akhi don't call one vote. Then the NDC, one vote. And so it becomes an exercise in futility. And that is why, as part of the preliminary reforms that we are proposing that legal backing should be given to the advisory role of IPAC. Yes, the EC is constitutionally independent and not subject to the control of anybody or person, but legislation can be passed to give legal backing to IPAC so that it is not treated anyhow by the EC. And we can do that without encroaching on the constitutional independence of the Electoral Commission. The Council of State is an advisory body, yet it is provided for under the Constitution of this country. The Peace Council is a similar body, but yet there is legislation backing the Peace Council to give legitimacy to their work. And these are the reforms we are proposing. Once we are assured that we will have fair, representation at IPAC, equitable voting rights at IPAC, and this dictatorial posture of the EC will change, the NDC will attend IPAC meetings and engage the EC at that level. But until then, we will continue raising these issues. These are just preliminary reform proposals. At the right time, a comprehensive document on our proposals, that is for the 2024 election, will be outlined. We'll be writing to the Electoral Commission, we'll be engaging them, but we'll be engaging other stakeholders in our democratic process, like you in the media, the diplomatic community, our chiefs, our clergy. And we hope that the EC, CSO, civil society, and we hope that the EC will see reason and change some of these things. So I don't think we have any more questions.
HAFIZ TV, inspiring positive change.